And he grabbed the stethoscope, put the stethoscope on my stomach, and he goes, Fran, I can only hear your heartbeat. I can't hear the baby's. And so she brought the little fetal monitor out, and she's moving it around, and we're talking minutes go by. I want to cry. And they couldn't hear the heartbeat.
This is Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide and we see God. We see his hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, big and little God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. Episode 139, 2 Miraculous Births. Yeah, when you hear Fran's, oh my God, especially you moms are going to hear this one and you're just going to go, there's just no way. Miraculous. Perfect here as we record this shortly before Christmas. Well, that's the other miraculous birth, of course. I just want to kind of reference before we hear from Fran just how God did it. I'm just dazzled by how God is God. I mean, he could have just said, hey, son, why don't you just head on down there, whoop, and boom, he's suddenly walking through Bethlehem or Nazareth or somewhere. No. God became man. The way we all become man or woman in this world, complete with a conception, a pregnancy, a birth, God and man, everything from one of us, one of the creatures, from Mary. And it's just how God did. The patience, I mean, he could have made him 20 years old. Nope, you're going to go through the whole thing. You're going to experience everything those people down on earth experience, all of it. And we're going to give this special experience to Mary as well because she's one of us. She's on our side, still is, at the Annunciation. And since most of us speak the English, some of us more gooder than others, but still, as we speak English and we hear Mary full of grace, we go, okay, yeah, so. When Luke wrote it, we have to remember in that original Greek, the word that he used, charitomene, which means full of grace, but so full of grace, so full of God from above, so full of this bursting grace that sin can't touch you. Not now, not at conception, never. It was a word up to that moment didn't exist. You will not find charitomene anywhere in literature, anywhere in Scripture up to that moment. So when we read in Luke that Mary was greatly troubled, not by what the angel Gabriel said to her about, oh yeah, you're going to have the son, Jesus, and he's going to sit on the throne of David, and his reign will be never-ending and all that. That's not the part that Luke tells us that she was greatly troubled by. She was greatly troubled by the angel's greeting. She was finding out who she was. And then she's hearing all this other stuff about son, Jesus, sitting on the throne of David, reign. Here's something else she just found out, that she is going to be a queen. How's that figure? Because her son's going to be sitting on the throne of David, and she knows her Scripture. 1,000 years before, there was this guy named David, King David, and his son Solomon, he became king. And his queen was who? Not his wife. He had hundreds of those. His mom. For 400 years, the king's queen was his mom. So she's hearing this. I'm going to have a son, Jesus. He's going to be king. That makes me queen. And Jesus is king. A little loftier position for the king and the queen. And Mary, from that position, intercedes for us, brings us to her son. That's what she does. And it's actually what she does in this episode with Fran and this miraculous birth.
Hi, Trapper. How are you?
It's all good. What's happening with you?
Oh my gosh, I'm a little nervous. I don't know why.
So am I. I've never talked to Fran before, and I'm kind of going,
gosh.
What do I say? I don't know what to say. Well, anyway.
So I don't know how this all works.
I say some words, and then you say some words. Then we just keep exchanging words with or without punctuation.
Are you trying to make me laugh?
It's not working, so I guess not.
It's not.
No, how'd you find the podcast, Fran?
First of all, I found it just by coincidence. I always like to watch those little near-death experiences on YouTube. I kind of am selective about it because I don't like all of them, but the ones I'm really interested in. And then your podcast came up, and I started listening to some of the near-death experiences there, and I was like blown away. It's like, these are awesome, and they just are so inspirational. And I passed them on to my kids and, people that are struggling, and they hear them, and it pretty much, changes their life. Really does.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah, it's
lot.
a
Why?
lot. I think like it just cements like especially with my kids because I've always been very signs and wonders kind of person. I've been very blessed to get a lot of signs in my life. And they're always like mom growing up I think they thought I was over the top, but now that they're older and experiencing life and maturing and especially my oldest son, he's kind of been drawn back to the Catholic Church and he's more open to hearing things and I think it gives them like a point like a purpose and a mission in their life and they just know the bigger picture. They can see the bigger picture. And I think that these podcasts do that. I think it just allows people to see the bigger picture and it's not all about right here and now. It's our eternal life with God and we all have a mission.
I'm
And I
getting
think that
chills. You're giving me chills here. This is what's supposed to happen here. Imagine
that's what
that.
happens. I
Yeah.
really think it helps. I really believe in the power of prayer and fasting. And when I added the fasting to my life more seriously is when I got stronger in my faith. I wasn't as scared. I'm not as fearful as I used to be. And I remember in Medjugorje, the Blessed Mother said, those who fast and pray fear no evil. And I believe that that has happened in my own life. I think given the time that we're living in now, I think God is really reaching through and giving us more signs and wonders again, because I feel like I'm having them again in my life, and I just think it's the times. It's His
I
grace.
totally agree.
I really do.
All right, let's talk about your
All right.
stories here. Where do you want to start?
Okay, I have so many stories. That's what's scary. And they all kind of link together. So it all started, like I've always been a Catholic. I've always had great faith. But I never really like absorbed the faith until I had a Mary encounter, which we grew up in Michigan, my husband and I, and then we got married, had 3 children in Michigan, and my husband got a job in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, so we moved there. It was 3 months after my daughter was born, Claire. And I went there and I didn't know anybody. I was lonely. It was hard being away from my family. I just had a newborn. But my sister in law gave me a book on Medjugorje and she said, have you heard what's going on there? And I'm like, not really, no. And so I read it. And when I was reading the book, and this is the true story, I just couldn't put it down. And my little one was taking a nap and the 2 boys were at school. And I kept hearing in my heart, like the Blessed Mother, saying, watch Sally Jesse Raphael at 4 o'clock. It's going to all be about Medjugorje. And I'm like, are you, this is crazy. I can't be hearing this. And I kept hearing it and I'm reading this book. And then I finally said to the voice, I always watch Oprah at 4 o'clock. This is like, 30 years ago.
And I was going to say,
And
Sally Jesse doing.
remember that?
Yeah, she was not the one I would picture doing Medjugorje, but continue the story.
I know, and she wasn't a believer, but so anyway, I looked up at the clock. I was still reading the book, and it was 4 o'clock, and I said, "What the heck?" So I turned it on, and there is Sally Jesse Raphael hanging, holding a book by Michael Brown. You know who Michael Brown is, right? He has Spirit Daily website. Have you heard of him?
I read Spirit Daily every day, so yes, I absolutely
Okay,
know
so
who it
he has
was.
the book. It's called, and she goes, "Here's the book called The Final Hour." And she said, I ran into it at an airport and I picked it up and I read it. And so there goes our show. She goes, I don't believe in coincidences. And she goes, and if you're watching this, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, all of a sudden the whole show is on Medjugorje. And I was just like in shock. I was shaking because I was like, how did this really happen to me? It was like, I remember calling my husband at work going, you can't believe what happened. And he's thinking I'm crazy, right? So I actually had a empty cassette in my VCR, rewound, ready to press play and record. And I recorded the whole show. I still have that video to this day. I'm going to have to like back up a little bit, but I inherited my grandmother's rosary from a cousin in Canada who no longer, was a Catholic. And she said, would you like grandma's rosary? And I said, sure. So I had that rosary in the house. So I ran and got it and I started praying the rosary. And I kept saying, oh, Lord, if I could only find a group of people that believed what I'm reading and believe, that would be so awesome. Because I didn't know anybody. I was in Ohio by myself. And then 2 weeks later, my husband comes home and he knew I wanted to find a rosary group. And he said, well, I think I found a rosary group for you. I said, what do you mean? He said, some strange lady came up to me at Mass today and asked me if I wanted to join their rosary group. He goes, no, but I think I know somebody who would. I went and met these women, and I have been a part of this rosary group for 27 years. And we've prayed every week for 27 years together. So that was like my first big cool thing that happened with the Blessed Mother. But the second thing is more of a Christmas story, which I thought was kind of cool. I could tell you this before Christmas. So when I inherited that rosary from my grandmother, we finally got a house after 2 years living in an apartment. We moved into our first house, and when we drove up the driveway, when we bought the house, by the way, when I was looking at the house, I heard in my heart, "You will live and die in this house." That was another thing that I heard, and I was like, "That's fine with me. I'm so happy to have a house." And by the way, we still live in this house and have had 5 kids and raised in this house. So that's a pretty cool thing that we're
Wow.
still in that house.
All right.
And I'm happy to be in that house. But anyway, one of the things I read in the Medjugorje book was that more souls go to heaven on Christmas Day than any other day of the year, even more than All Saints Day. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
I've not heard that.
Okay, so that's what the visionary said. More souls go to heaven on Christmas Day, even more than All Saints Day. So I always had kind of filed that away in my head because I figured, well, I inherited my grandma's rosary. I'm gonna start praying for her soul. Maybe there's a reason I inherited it. So I always prayed for my grandmother on the rosary, every rosary. That following, I think Christmas, we had a beautiful Christmas morning with our kids, and we were all sitting around, and the kids were all playing with their toys. And you know how, like a husband and wife, you just kind of sit there and you watch your kids play your toys. And we were drinking coffee, my husband and I, and all of a sudden, my 3.5-year-old, my son Brent, he got up from playing with his toys. He walks over to the Christmas tree, and we're like looking at each other. And my husband, like, what is he doing? And he's looking up and down the Christmas tree, and he pulls off an ornament, and he comes up to me and he says, "Mom, this is from your grandmother." And he hands it to me, and I'm like, "What?" And he said, "Your grandmother wants you to have this." And then I just instantly felt the spirit of the Lord like go through me, like, oh my gosh, my grandmother is thanking me for all the prayers I have said for her. And she's telling me she went to heaven on Christmas Day. And he didn't know anything about my grandmother. He never, he didn't know anything. He doesn't even know like what a grandmother is. So I said to my husband, I have to ask him if what grandma he's talking about. I need confirmation. So I went over to him when he was playing with his toys and I said, "Brent, what grandmother are you talking about?" And he looks up like as he's listening and he said, "Your dad's mom." And that was exactly the grandmother.
Wow.
I know.
Talk
So,
about being filled by the Spirit. Your son, my God, three
oh
and
my
a half.
gosh. And
Wow.
he was only, yeah, 3.5, and he went back to playing with his toys like nothing, and I literally was, like, on cloud 9 the rest of the day because, I mean, what greater gift could I ever get?
Did you cry a little bit?
Oh my gosh, I went bananas. My husband's like, he was, like, a believer. I mean, he couldn't believe it. So that was a really that was the best one of the best Christmases I ever had. And I know that my son and her have a connection. There's stories about them having connections later on, but there's just not enough time to explain it. But my other really big story, and this happened in the month before that Christmas story. I should have told it in order, but I'm a little nervous. But
Me too. I still
my
haven't recovered. I'm talking to Fran.
well, the big story is this is a big one. Is when I was pregnant with my fifth child, I was like in my 8th month of pregnancy, and as you get bigger and bigger, you get more uncomfortable, and I couldn't sleep, so I went into a guest room, and I went in there to sleep so I could, have a good night's sleep, and I fell into a really deep, deep sleep, like great sleep, but then all of a sudden I opened my eyes, and I had this fear and panic come over me, like it was horrible, horrible. It was like just something's going to happen with the delivery of my baby. It was like just total panic. And right in that very moment, I heard the Blessed Mother say, "Be at peace. I am with you. Everything will be fine." Just like that. And it wasn't coming from me, it was outside of me. And I could see kind of the image of the Blessed Mother in the corner of my sight. And I answered her with like tears of joy, saying, "Oh my gosh, Blessed Mother, I'm so sorry. I haven't trusted. Of course, everything's going to be all right. You're going to take care of me and you're going to look after me." And I fell back to sleep in the most peaceful sleep. It was just like a heavenly sleep. And the next morning just happened to be my rosary group day. And I went in and I told the whole group because it was such an amazing experience. And this older lady came up to me and she handed me a card with Juan Diego prayer, Our Lady of Guadalupe. And she said, "Oh, Our Lady of Guadalupe was pregnant and she's carrying the Christ child, and you just need to pray to her." And she said, "Look at the words on the back." And I don't know if you remember what Our Lady of Guadalupe said to Juan Diego, but she said something like, "Do not worry about any fear or trepidation. Don't you know that I am your mother and you are like in the folds of my mantle?" It was just like,
I gotcha. I
so
gotcha. Didn't I tell you I gotcha? Yeah, it's one of those. Yeah, that's what she said to Juan Diego, and she says it to all of us. Absolutely.
Exactly. So it was like a little confirmation of like what I heard: "Be at peace. I am with you. Everything will be fine." So, fast forward to 2 weeks before my due date. It was right after Halloween. I was running around, and the doctors tell you to pay attention to fetal movement at the end of your pregnancy. They always want you to count your fetal movement. And it was been like 3 days, and I had not paid attention to, with Michael. My son was a boy and his name was Michael. And I'm like, I just wasn't paying attention. And something stopped me in the middle of a morning when I was running around with the kids, and it said, "Stop, pay attention." And so I'm like, when was the last time I felt my baby move? And I couldn't remember. And so I laid on the couch and I just laid there waiting for the baby to move, and it wouldn't move. I kept pushing on my stomach, tugging on different places, and it wasn't moving. And I just got that fear and panic came over me. So I called my doctor's office and I said, "I want to come in and hear the heartbeat." And they said, "Well, all the doctors are called out on emergency. There's nobody here today. So if you're worried, you need to go somewhere else and like go to the hospital." So of course I didn't right away. I just drank some orange juice and a candy bar from Halloween, and I went back and laid down, and nothing was happening. And so I called my husband, and he usually thinks I'm a worrywart. But it was very unusual because he just like got in the car and came right home. So he went next door, and this lady next door had MS, and he grabbed the stethoscope from her because she was a nurse, but she couldn't come over because she was in a wheelchair. And he brought it home, and he's put the stethoscope on my stomach, and he goes, "Fran, I can only hear your heartbeat. I can't hear the baby's." And usually by your 8th month, you can just put your ear to the belly and hear the heartbeat. So he said, "Let's go," because that had been like 3 hours. So we put all the kids in the car and went to the hospital. And it was, of course, we got stuck in traffic. It was one of those situations. And we just kept praying the rosary all the way there. And I just kept remembering the words, "Be at peace. I am with you. Everything will be fine." So we pull into the emergency room and they send us up to the maternity ward. And I walked in, and of course I broke down crying because the reality, it was hitting me. And I said, "I can't feel my baby move." And they all looked at each other. The nurses like, "Oh, we've done this before." Like they had that dreaded face, like, "Uh-oh." And so this nurse took my hand and she said, "Let's go in the room." And she told me her name was Anne. And that gave me so much comfort because immediately I thought of the Blessed Mother's mother, Anne. And so she said, "Oh, we're going to just lay you down and we're going to look for the heartbeat." And so she brought the little fetal monitor out and she's moving it around. And we're talking minutes go by. I want to cry. And they couldn't hear the heartbeat. And so I thought, "Oh my God, my baby's gone." And then all of a sudden we heard this little boop, boop. And it was like slowest little heartbeat. And I was, "Oh, thank you, God. Thank you, God." And I'm like, "I'm so sorry. I'm embarrassed." I came in and she's like, "Uh-oh, no, no, no." She goes, "You're not going anywhere." She said, "It's very unusual for you to have this feeling that something's wrong." She goes, I don't ignore that." She goes, "We're going to keep you here to run more tests." So they hooked me up to this the thing that measures your contractions, and with the heartbeat, I couldn't feel it. It's like Braxton Hicks, the little tiny ones. The heartbeat would go down. And so she called the doctor, and my doctor that was usually taking care of me was gone. He was on vacation. So I had this substitute doctor come in, and he comes in and he's like checking me out, and he does an internal on me. And he said, "Wow, this baby is way up under your ribs. It should be much further down. We're going to break the water and get you going. We're going to get this baby out." So he went to break my water, and there was no amniotic fluid in me. It was gone. So that was amazing that it was completely gone, which is dangerous. He's like, "Oh, that's not good. Let's get you some Pitocin." And Pitocin is a medication they give to you to get you to contract. And I had Pitocin with two other my children, and it sent me into immediate hard labor. Like I've never had like a problem getting my labor going with Pitocin. Well, they administered the Pitocin, and nothing's happening. So they administered more Pitocin. And the weird part of it was that it was showing contractions on the machine. And when he went to touch my belly, it's supposed to be hard, and it was like jello. And he was just, the doctor was just like, what's going on here? This is so weird. He's never seen anything like it. Like, I'm showing contractions, but my stomach is hard as wasn't even hard. So they gave me more Pitocin. And all of a sudden, I just got pain in my back and my legs, but nothing was happening with my belly, no contractions. But then the heart rate was going down. It went to like 30 beats a minute, which is nothing. And so he kept going in and out of the room with my husband, trying to figure out what to do. And he said, you know what? We got to have this baby. He goes, I've never seen anything like this. We just got to have this baby. So they rushed me in to have a C-section. They strapped me down, and they put the drape up so you can't see anything. And my husband and I were silently praying the rosary. And in that moment, I felt like every one of my relatives that had passed on was in that room waiting for the delivery of this baby. They were just, I could feel them. And he, did the incision to open me up. And all of a sudden he puts his hands up in me, and he had to put them way up high, like under my rib cage. And he's like pulling, and he's like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. He goes, I knew it. I knew it. And I could feel, like, you could feel the table. That's how hard he had to pull out. The table was like moving around, and he pulls the baby out, and he said, oh my gosh. And he goes, this baby has the cord around its neck twice, and once around its shoulder. And he's trying to untangle Michael. And he said, he's out, and he said, oh my gosh, he has a knot in the umbilical cord too. So the baby had the cord around its neck twice, once around its shoulder, and it had what it's called a true knot in the umbilical cord, which means no food or water can like go through there because it's a knot. And they were like in awe that this baby was alive. And they ran it over to the little bassinet. And he was breathing like labored breathing. They rushed him off to NICU, and they said it would probably be like 3 hours before the baby would start breathing normally. And if it didn't, then they'd have to put it on a respirator. But after 3 hours, he just took the most perfect breath, and he is perfectly healthy. And the doctor said if I had had one contraction, when they gave me the Pitocin, if I had had one normal contraction, he would have died instantly. And what I know to be true is the Blessed Mother, because my belly was like jello, it wouldn't contract. She was placing her mantle of protection over Michael. And he said this was like a true miracle, like in all of his practice and all of his years, he's never seen a baby so tangled up in an umbilical cord and live, and especially with a true knot. And they also said that the umbilical cord was hanging from the placenta by a thread when Michael came out. And so it's virtually impossible. They don't know how Michael lived. And my placenta, I know this sounds gross, but it was completely black and ratty. And they had to send it to pathology to see what was wrong, because they'd never seen a placenta like that. So he's a miracle, and he's perfect. And it was totally, it was the Blessed Mother's and obviously God the Father that protected him and allowed him to live. And he never had any problems or anything. He's perfect.
My Lord. Can we go back just for, there's about 5,000 different places I want to say, wait. Number one is explain why a contraction would have killed him.
Because think about this. The cord is around his neck twice, once around his shoulder. So if your uterus is squeezing down on that baby, it's choking. There was no cord left. So it would just completely choke him to death.
It would have tightened the cord even more around the neck.
Yes, that's why when I was even having a tiny Braxton Hicks contraction, when I wouldn't even feel, his heart rate would go to 30 beats a minute because it was squeezing down on his neck. So he wasn't getting any oxygen.
All right, number two, how do you get a true knot in an umbilical cord? How did he flip, or what happened?
I know.
Is that the beginning of the problem, do you think, or did they think?
I don't know. He must have gotten the knot first. I figured he was circling around and getting, doing little flips in there. And so he must have done a little something. It's a very rare thing, a true knot. You can look it up. He must have done something, and it caused a knot in the umbilical cord. And then he ended up tangling himself twice around the neck and the shoulder. It really is, it blows my mind. Plus, the umbilical cord was hanging like a thread. They said a thread from the placenta.
Yeah, so he's almost disconnected himself.
Yes.
Wait, the amniotic fluid, which is the sac, that's supposed to be in the sac around him, right?
Right.
Now,
that's gone.
well,
That's
wait,
gone.
now, why don't you know that? Isn't that part of when the water breaks? Isn't that what that is?
No. And he did. He put that little knitting needle thing up me, and he went to pop it, and he goes, "There's nothing there. It's gone."
My God.
I know. I forgot about that part. That's amazing too. That's what they swim around in.
He's got none of that.
None of that. The knot, and it's just.
I don't even know how a baby gets into the back of your ribs and everything. It's like, what the heck? That's just crazy.
It's all way up in there. He kept checking me. He just couldn't figure out. I think that's why when he went in and first thing he said was, "I knew it. Oh my gosh, I knew it." He was thinking in his head, he knew this baby was tangled up in the cord. And I remember just all of a sudden something stopped me and said, "Listen, what if I hadn't stopped that day? What if I hadn't paid attention? He would have been gone."
So your placenta is dying, basically, right? Isn't that kind of
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so it's dying. You've got no fluid in there. He's hanging by a thread, wrapped around twice.
3 times, once around his shoulder too.
Yeah. So how many weeks was he delivered then?
Only 2 weeks early, but he was a little shriveled up. My husband called him Yoda as a joke because he looked like Yoda from, Star Wars. His
Not
face
a
was
pretty baby when born.
No, he wasn't. He looked shriveled up. Like he looked like.
Oh my gosh. Well, he would have been. He's got nothing.
He was.
There's nothing going on there.
No. But I remember my pediatrician came to check him out. He was so sweet. He kept coming to me. He goes, "I want you to know he's absolutely perfect. There is nothing wrong with him." And what's funny about Michael was he was my most athletic, my easiest baby. He was just, he was, believe me, there was nothing wrong with this kid.
Go back to that time when how far before all this were you having your Mary encounter and hearing that inner voice?
That was about probably 3.5 to 4 weeks earlier.
Earlier.
I was about 7 or 8 months. I think it was closer to 8 months.
So like almost a month before you're being told,
a month before,
you got some bad stuff coming, but don't worry, we got you. I got you.
Yes, that was it. And I even told my whole Rosary group about it. So it wasn't like it was in my head. I mean, it was like, how when you're thinking something, but when I was in that fear, her voice was so soft and so feminine and so peaceful. "Be at peace. I am with you. Everything will be fine." And so I had to hold on to that when I was going through this because I'm like, I really believed it when we were praying that rosary on the way to the hospital. I'm like, I have to believe those words. She said this and I'm going to believe it.
Take us through that again. What was going on in you? Where were you again? And why were you all of a sudden concerned? What was going on?
I was in bed and I remember I woke up and I fell into a deep sleep. But when I woke up, I was in that fear and panic. And the actual thought was in my head, "I am afraid about the delivery." That's what came into my head. "I'm afraid of the delivery." It was like something's going to go wrong. That was the fear I had. Like something's going to go wrong. And that's when I heard her voice. And then after that, I answered her like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I should have. Of course you're going to be with me. Like that's my faith. Of course I'm praying the rosary. I know you're going to be here. I'm consecrated to you." I mean, I consecrated myself to her. And so I just put it, I fell back asleep and I had that peace. I know it was her voice.
Yeah.
And then it was the following 3 weeks. I think it was 2 to 3 weeks later. That's when it all happened. So I could always, as it was unfolding, I heard that voice in me, "Be at peace. I am with you. Everything will be fine."
Wow.
I was replaying that voice though. I don't know if it was hers. I was replaying what I heard in my heart so that it would calm me down. And the weird thing is, everything I did, think about it. This is how I know the Blessed Mother was involved too. Everything I did, I was just like getting ready to vacuum and it was like, "Stop and pay attention." When was the last time that voice in my head? When was the last time you felt your baby move? That was like what I heard. And I'm like, I don't know. And it just had this I don't even know. And I even went upstairs, I remember, and my sister called me And I answered the phone, and she's like, "What's wrong? You sound weird." And I said, I don't remember the last time I felt my baby move. I go, "I got to go." And I just hung up on her. And something told her to get in the car after that. She drove from Michigan. Like, I tried to go to the obstetrician. They were all called out on emergency. So if I had gone in and they had found the heartbeat, I would have gone home, right? Because they would have said, "Oh, your heart, I can hear the heartbeat." They wouldn't have sent me to the hospital. I would have gone home and Michael would have died. If my husband had heard the heartbeat from the stethoscope from the nurse next door, if he had he heard my heartbeat, but he didn't hear Michael's. And if he had heard the baby's, I would have said, "Oh, this is ridiculous. I'm fine." You know what I mean? You would have just, so like every corner, I was being pushed to go to the hospital, and so that's why, I just know it was all God.
Yeah. Wow. What
You know?
that's as you say, the doctors recognize, and I'm sure the nurses recognize that was a complete miracle. There's just no way.
Oh, it was. In fact, you're going to laugh at this, but I went to a little league baseball game the following summer. And I was telling somebody the story because I always told people these stories. And she's sitting at the bench listening to my story. And a nurse that was sitting behind us said, "Excuse me, I worked at Riverside Hospital, and I remember when that happened because all the nurses were talking about it the next day." And she said, "I even remember the part about the placenta." This is what the stranger's telling me. I'm like, how embarrassing. That's what I joked around with her. But so, I mean, it was like the big talk. And, even the doctor that took over because my doctor was on vacation when I went for my follow up, he said, "Boy, you were the talk of the office. We can't believe what," it was like. And a few years later, I asked my doctor again, I said, "Do you really think that was a miracle?" Because, you start thinking, he goes, "Oh my gosh, I've never in all my practice have I ever been through anything like that." And I said, "Well, could I have the full report? Because I really wanted to have the information to verify what I'm telling you." And he gave me the full report and everything. So I have all that. Yeah.
That's just a
So
big wow. That's just a big wow. Well, you can't
it
top
is
that story, so I'm assuming that's what we're going out on.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have a million other stories. I mean, we could talk another time because you've got so. I mean, I can call you another time, but I have a lot of. I have a friend that has like she's had visions. We went to a Holy Spirit center or a Holy Spirit seminar, and she started receiving visions, and it's really incredible. And it all goes back to this nun that used to be in a convent in a nursing home, and how we were brought to her through my friend's visions. And it's just
Okay.
it's just a story. It's like something you could write out of the books.
All right. Well, we'll come back and get that one down the road then. Okay. So let's
Okay, yeah,
stay in touch. And I mean, these were obviously very powerful stories for you. Life.
I hope I didn't talk too much. I hope
No.
you can edit a lot of my jibber jabber out because I was nervous. I don't know why I'm nervous.
I know I get really nervous when I talk to Fran too. It's just something about talking to Fran. I don't know what it is. Well, thanks,
Okay.
Fran. This
Well,
was
thanks, Trapper. It
awesome.
was nice talking with you. And take care and God bless you. I'll be praying for you. And I want to say one more thing. I know I it was so Mary oriented because I have such a relationship with her, but Jesus is my number one, and I want to make sure people know that.
And that's perfectly said. He's number one, and Mary takes us there.
He's number one. He's number one. She led me right to him in the most profound way.
Thank you, Fran. Look forward to our next conversation. And miraculous birth. My gosh, impossible. Impossible. And you know some Medjugorje showed up in this episode again? That's an ongoing theme. Just Mary saying hi again. Mary, remember at Medjugorje is saying that what she started at Fatima, she would complete in Medjugorje, that she would no longer appear anywhere on earth after she completed everything. We've talked before about this end of an age that is coming up. Soon, very soon. All right. So thank you again, Fran. Interesting times we live in, guys. Interesting times. Telling you. You have a story? It's not a competition. Your story's different. What's yours? Encounter with an angel, some kind of divine intervention, near-death experience. What is your story? Get a hold of me at touchedbyheaven.net. While you're there, click on the Stay Informed link. That way we'll get you the email, too, of other things happening in the Touched by Heaven universe. There's also a link to Patreon if you want to help us out. Hey, salute this week to Steve Jonas. Thank you for your continued support, Steve. Month to month through Patreon. You can do it there, link there at touchedbyheaven.net, or you can go to patreon.com and search for Trapper Jack. Thank you so much. If these episodes are a blessing to you, any amount you want, it's okay by us. Whatever amount feels right, it's okay by us. Thank you for keeping this all going. And thank you also for your ratings and reviews within the app. That helps people find out about what we do here. What do we do here? Whatever it is, we're going to do it again next week. What do you say? See you next week here at Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.